During a 2008 episode of the show Wife Swap, two starkly different families were presented. When the laid-back and carefree Tonkovic family was put against the strict Stockdale family, the Stockdale boys were introduced to a new and much different way of life. Their reclusive yet harmonious existence seemed picture perfect to the outside world for years, but behind the closed doors of their secluded farmhouse, more must have been unfolding. 9 years later, one of the Stockdale boys turned a gun on his strict mother and his younger brother before attempting to take his own life.
2 dead bodies along with what they believe is a self-inflicted gunshot wound on a third person over on Dolphin Street yesterday afternoon. They got the 911 call hang up around 4:30 in the afternoon. The victims, 21-year-old James Stockdale and his mother, 54-year-old Catherine Stockdale. The alleged suspect, James's brother, Catherine's son, 25-year-old Jacob Stockdale.
Had Jacob Stockdale snapped after years of strict upbringing? Did his mother's stringent rules and lifestyle lead him to murder? This is the heartbreaking story of the Stockdale family. Timothy and Catherine Stockdale resided on their secluded family farm in Beach City, Ohio, with their 4 sons, Calvin, Charles, Jacob, and James. The parents raised their sons on this isolated farm to shield them from negative influences. They were all part of the Stockdale family band, a bluegrass group. The youngest, James, played the bass, Calvin played the banjo, Charles played the mandolin, their father, Timothy, was on guitar, and Jacob played the fiddle. Jacob was a remarkably talented fiddle player, having won the Ohio Youth Fiddle Championship 3 times and the Ohio State Grand Fiddle Championship in 2012. Jacob began taking music lessons at the age of 7, and by 12, the Stockdale family band was formed. The boys said that their father was their inspiration for playing this style of music. During their childhood, they had music nights where Timothy played the guitar, while the boys banged on pots and pans until they were old enough to play real instruments. Their mother, Catherine, better known as Kathy, managed the band. She believed that nothing was more wholesome than playing old-time bluegrass with family. They traveled across the US, competing and winning several regional competitions, and even wrote 3 albums. Eventually, Calvin and Charles left the band when they moved out, leaving Jacob, James, and Timothy to continue performing. Growing up, Jacob Stockdale and his 3 brothers, Charles, Calvin, and James, were raised in a very strict household. The boys had to complete grueling hours of chores to earn tokens that could be exchanged for rewards, such as a few minutes of radio listening or sticks of chewing gum. They weren't allowed to have friends, and were rarely permitted the freedom to choose how they spent their time. They followed a highly regimented schedule, which included working on the farm, homeschooling, house chores, and band practice from early morning to late at night. Tim and Kathy claimed they wanted to protect their 4 boys from bad influences and banned them from several activities. Kathy didn't believe in video games, rap music, or television, and internet access was restricted because she believed these items created redundant minds and lazy children. The boys were not allowed to have friends of the opposite sex or to date, as their parents wanted them to focus on living a moral life rather than thinking about girls. Foul language was also strictly forbidden, and the siblings were rarely allowed to make their own decisions. The family lived in relative seclusion and had minimal contact with the outside world. In the early 2000s, reality TV was on the rise, and Paramount Network aired a new series called Wife Swap. Wife Swap selected 2 families with very different lifestyles, and then had them exchange wives/mothers for 2 weeks. Often, the comedy or drama arose from a strict mother trying to cope with children from a laid-back household. Conversely, a laid-back mum would try to get a high-strung household to relax and enjoy themselves. In 2008, the Stockdale boys asked their parents if they could participate in the experience, and Tim and Kathy finally agreed. On the 23rd of April 2008, The Stockdale Tonkovic episode of Wife Swap aired on ABC during season 4 of the original series. It featured the Stockdale family from Ohio and the Tonkovic family from Illinois. As usual, the families featured on the show had completely different philosophies about life and raising children. The Tonkovic family, Lori, her husband John, and their children Paul and Megan, were easygoing and relaxed. In the show, Lori said, "You only have so long, so enjoy every day as it comes." The episode depicted her dancing with her children, bringing fast food home, and liberally handing out cash.
Guys, it's burger night! The Tonkovic family diet is pretty much eat what you want. I work 3 days during the week. My husband normally works the PM shift, so he normally sleeps late. The kids, they sleep until 1 o'clock.
They lived a carefree lifestyle, allowing their 2 kids, aged 21 and 17, the freedom to go about their lives as they pleased. Lori even mentioned that her kids had free reign over anything in their home. Additionally, their children's partners lived with them in the family home, further emphasizing their relaxed approach to life and parenting. But the Stockdale family had a completely different perspective on family life.
We moved out to the farm to develop wholesome values in our children.
The day we moved, we heard gunshots in our neighborhood, and I knew we had made the right decision.
When Lori joined the Stockdale family, she remarked that she thought the children were treated like slaves.
The boys collect tokens by doing chores to exchange for things that they want. You know, this is like they're slaves.
Kathy left Lori a list of strict rules and chores that the children had to follow, highlighting the stark contrast between the 2 families' lifestyles. The family manual started off by saying, "Welcome to our home. We're not just a family, we're a band, the Stockdale Family Band. We play bluegrass in barn dances and shindigs all over our area. We have Calvin on banjo, Charles on mandolin, Jacob on fiddle, and James on upright bass. Tim, my husband, is on guitar, and I'm the manager. A family that plays together stays together, and there's nothing so wholesome as playing old-time bluegrass with your favorite people, your family. We moved to the country to get the boys away from the city. Our children are being raised away from violent language, sexual influences, drinking, smoking, drugs, rap music, all the things we left behind in the city. Instead, we are raising our children on a diet of wholesome activities and farm work, keeping their minds pure and their bodies healthy, and keeping out the influences of modern society. That is why we homeschool. TV and video games are banned. They produce redundant minds and lazy children. I want my boys to be active, productive and busy every waking moment. Internet access is restricted, and there's no idle surfing in the house. Instead, we enjoy spending time reading to each other, playing music or storytelling. We do not look at chores as free slave labor. We are giving our children a good work ethic and a selfless attitude. It keeps us grounded and bonds us together. We like to teach our boys to work with their hands. This means chores, yard work and cleaning. The list of rules stated that the number 1 rule was that the children must obey their parents, saying, "The first rule of this house is to obey your parents." Teaching the boys respect is vital in this modern world where so many children disrespect adults. We don't tolerate any of the boys hurting each other physically or verbally, and insist that if they make a mess, they clean it up. Kathy also stated that mealtime at their house was sacred and special, and that meals had to be shared as a family. Meals were not to be hurried, and there was a detailed menu for each day. The boys were not permitted to have candy or snacks throughout the day, and if they didn't finish their meal, they were not given anything else until they completed what was left on their plate. Kathy explained that the boys woke up at 7:30 every morning and received a 4-minute warning before breakfast was served. If they were late for breakfast, they were fined 25 cents, with the fee increasing the later they arrived. After breakfast, the boys were required to complete their chores before starting their homeschooling, and then at 4 p.m. they participated in debate lessons. At the end of the day, they had dinner, followed by practicing their instruments. During the first week of the episode, each wife had to follow the rules of the family they joined. Lori broke down several times as she saw the strict life the boys were living.
It's just sad to me. Kids need to laugh and have fun.
The token system puts an awful lot of pressure on the kids. I feel very, very, very sad for them. God, I feel so sad for these kids.
I'm going to take them all home with me. I didn't realize this was going to be so hard.
In the second week, however, they were allowed to implement their own rules.
I got you guys cable TV, as well as video games.
Nope.
I've disconnected the TV and boxed up all your video games. They're gone. In their place will be good, hard work.
During this second week, Laurie allowed the Stockdale children to watch TV, play video games, and socialize with other children. Initially, the boys felt uncomfortable and extremely guilty about this new freedom and relaxed way of living, as it was something they had never experienced.
What do you guys think about this?
It's fun for the present. It has no value, really.
I feel guilty right now, but I love it.
At one point, Jacob ran out crying and told Laurie that if he played video games, his parents would tell him he would burn in hell for doing so. During the episode, Laurie even tried to persuade the older boys, Charles and Calvin, to go on a date.
There are certain things that we feel very strongly about.
Look, I know you do. I would never tell you or make you do anything.
Well, you do it to my brothers.
I will make them not listen to your father and choose on their own without his influence. That's what I will do.
Back in the Tonkovic household, Kathy banned smoking TV and made the kids start earning their money by doing farm work. She split the girls from the boys and gave the girls in the family toy dolls to look after, in the hopes it would teach them about pregnancy and sex before marriage. By the end of the 2 weeks, the mothers returned to their own families. Laurie hoped that she had shown the Stockdales that they could enjoy activities just for fun and that not everything needed to be structured and planned out. Kathy, on the other hand, said she couldn't think of anything she would want to bring back from the Tonkovic household into her own. When the parents came face to face, the conversation became very heated. Laurie told Kathy that she had no heart and didn't allow her children to have any fun, then stormed out.
You know what? I'm done.
I'm done too.
Bye.
It was fun.
I really enjoyed you and your children, okay? But you?
Come on, get out. I need a cigarette.
No wonder they walk around like robots
Yeah.
and talk like that.
I need a cigarette.
Talk about my kids. How dare her?
"9 years after the Stockdale-Tonkovic wife swap episode aired, a tragic event occurred. By 2017, Calvin had left to Hillsdale College in Michigan, and Charles went to Philadelphia to study medicine, leaving only Kathy, Tim, Jacob, and James living on the farm. On the 15th of June 2017, at 4:36 p.m., a 911 call was made to the local police department in Ohio. When the operator answered, the caller quickly hung up. This immediately raised concerns, so they traced the call back to the Stockdale home, and officers were dispatched. Upon arrival, officers saw the front door open and found 21-year-old James William Stockdale dead nearby. They then heard a gunshot from inside and rushed into the house once backup arrived. They found Jacob with a wound to his head, and he was clinging to life. Further inside the house, in the bathroom, they found the body of Catherine Barbara Stockdale. Both she and James were pronounced dead at the scene. The officers quickly surmised that Jacob had killed his mother and brother before turning the gun on himself. Luckily, Timothy, the father, was not home at the time of the murders.
Yesterday afternoon at about 4:36 p.m., our office received a 911 call from the residents. It was a landline call, not a cell phone call. It was a hang-up call. At that time, after we received the hang-up call, which we do in a number of cases on a daily basis, we responded deputies to the residents. Upon arrival at the residence, the deputies noticed that the front door was open. As they approached the house, they seen what they believed to be someone laying on the floor. They gave verbal commands. There was no response. And at that time, there was a gunshot that went off. After the gunshot went off, they tactically approached the house when some backup arrived and discovered that the suspect, Jacob Stockdale, had attempted suicide and shot himself when they arrived.
Jacob was rushed to Metro Health Medical Center to be treated for his life-threatening injuries. Doctors were able to save his life, but his injuries were serious and required a long hospital stay. A few days later, Jacob's older brother Calvin said in a statement, I speak for our family when I say we love him and forgive him. The prayers and support from my family have been deeply appreciated. My brother Jacob is still in critical condition, and we are praying for his physical recovery as our family makes funeral plans and begins the healing process. In a press conference, a few days after the shooting, the sheriff stated that they had never been called to the Stockdale house before and had no reason to believe anyone in the home was in danger, and that they had no understanding of why this had happened.
It's hard to, kind of surmise what the motive may have been. There's some speculation. We don't really want to get into that part of it, but, we'll continue to investigate this case and try to determine if there's a motive. Just do not know.
Jacob's recovery was long, and police urgently wanted him to get better so they could question him and ask him why he had done this. A GoFundMe page was started to raise funds for the memorial service for Kathy and James. This fund eventually reached over $31,000, and some of those funds were used to help pay for Jacob's medical expenses as well, which was quite controversial. Police held off charging Jacob until he had recovered from the self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, but eventually, on the 26th of September 2018, the Stark County Sheriff's Department filed the indictment against Jacob, and he was made aware of the charges against him, which included 2 counts of murder and a firearm specification. However, before the authorities could arrest him, Jacob turned himself in the following day, on the 27th of September 2018.
Jacob Stockdale was charged this week in the 2017 murders of his mother and brother, Catherine and James Stockdale. The 26-year-old Stark County man turned himself in Thursday. He was recovering from a self-inflicted gunshot wound stemming from the 2017 incident.
Jacob's lawyer was given a pretrial date, scheduled for the 9th of October 2018, and his bond was set at $1 million. Stark County Sheriff George Mayer, in a statement, said, "It is our hope that this arrest offers some closure to the Stockdale family and the entire community." When the pretrial date arrived, Jacob's defense attorney filed a motion to determine his competency to stand trial. Jacob pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity and was placed in a mental institution called Heartland Behavioral Healthcare Hospital for observation.
I am also going to be filing the not guilty by reason of insanity plea and ask the court to order the appropriate evaluations for that plea also.
Jacob stayed at Heartland Behavioral Healthcare Hospital until his trial, but struggled to remain confined, attempting to escape on several occasions. In November 2019, Jacob devised a plan to escape the mental hospital where he was being held. He knew stacks of books would be transported in and out of the hospital, and decided his best plan of action was to flee by hiding behind the stacks of books as they were being removed. Jacob was ultimately caught before he could escape the building. A month later, he attempted to escape once again, this time with a more obvious approach. He tried to blend in with a group of people leaving the institution, but was quickly discovered before he could make it out of the doors. While Jacob was under observation at the institution, Dr. Arcangela Wood determined Jacob was clinically sane when he committed the murders. According to Dr. Wood, based on reasonable psychological certainty, Jacob did not have a severe mental illness when he was charged. Dr. Wood also found no disease or defects in Jacob, and noted that he was aware of the wrongfulness of his actions. Due to Dr. Wood's report, Jacob was deemed capable of standing trial, as Wood believed Jacob was capable of understanding court proceedings. However, Jacob's defense attorney was certain that he was not fit to stand trial, so he requested a second opinion. A second psychiatric evaluation was performed, and this time the doctor stated there was cause for concern and that Jacob was not competent to stand trial. This doctor also mentioned that Jacob could be restored to competency within a year if he received intense mental health treatment. Jacob's defense attorney then wanted a third opinion, but that was denied due to the additional $5,000 cost to taxpayers. After reviewing the results of both psychiatric evaluations, the judge declared Jacob incompetent to stand trial. He ordered that Jacob remain at Heartland Behavioral Healthcare Hospital for treatment, delaying the trial until Jacobs could be deemed competent. Jacob stayed at the hospital for a total of 8 months and reportedly made significant progress. During that time, he was required to participate in group therapy and mock trials, which were used to assess whether he could understand and follow the proceedings of a real trial. The psychiatrist noted that during these mock trials, Jacob was able to understand plea bargaining, court terminology, and the trial process, and he had the capacity to respond with relevant answers. This report gave the judge sufficient reason to deem Jacob competent, and he was scheduled for a sanity hearing on the 30th of March, 2020. Due to COVID-19, this hearing was rescheduled for 8 a.m. on the 4th of May and then pushed back again to the 8th of September 2020. Jacob was teleconferenced into the hearing from Heartland Behavioral Medical Center. Throughout the hearing, Jacob often did not respond or acknowledge the judge. His attorney explained that Jacob had difficulty processing and speaking when using technology, potentially due to a fear of it.
Mr. Stockdale, are you able to hear me? First of all, officer, can you hear me?
Yes, Your Honor, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stockdale, I am Judge Frank Forcioni. Are you able to hear me today? Okay, he is not responding. My first concern was whether they could hear, and the officer standing behind him can hear. Mr. Stockdale, can you see your lawyers here today, Mr. Kazanis and Mr. Graham?
An additional psychologist found Jacob mentally sane on the 31st of December 2020. A trial date was then set, with the intention that Jacob would serve his sentence in prison. The original trial date was set for the 26th of January 2021, but due to a spike in COVID-19 cases, it was delayed to the 4th of May 2021. A new pre-trial hearing was set for the 11th of February, which Jacob also attended virtually. During this hearing, the judge reviewed Jacob's behavior during his time at Heartland Behavioral, including his 2 escape attempts.
I received a letter on February 3rd from Dr. Ahmad, AHMED, from Heartland Behavioral Healthcare. And in the letter, it specifically states, following Mr. Stockdale's hearing on February 1st, Heartland staff has expressed concerns about his current status. Particularly early in his admission, he had 2 documented incidents of attempting to leave the unit in what is believed an effort to elope from Heartland. During these incidents, he attempted to hide in the hospital library after closing hours. Following this incident and being restricted to the unit, a couple weeks later, he subsequently attempted to blend in with a group of patients who were leaving the unit.
The judge also considered a letter from one of Jacob's doctors, stating that they believed Jacob was now able to wait out his trial and sentencing in Stark County Jail.
Later, they go on to say Mr. Stockdale's current level of functioning, which is more stable, better allows him for him to carry out any potential behaviors or plans he may have. They are recommending that the least restrictive environment for Mr. Stockdale while considering community safety is the Stark County Jail.
During Jacob's stay in the institution, while awaiting his trial date in May, his family asked the judge for leniency in his sentencing. They were very open about their forgiveness and expressed a desire for the lightest sentence possible. A week before his trial was set to start, Jacob eventually pleaded guilty to the murders of his mother and brother, still not giving a motive. In the end, Jacob Stockdale was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, 15 years for each death, and Jacob is eligible for parole in 2048. After Jacob received his sentence, the Stockdale family remained relatively quiet regarding the murders. However, they stated that they continued to mourn the loss of their younger brother and their mother as they attempted to move on from the tragedy. Jacob's older brother Calvin said in a statement, "James, our youngest brother, has always been a catalyst of family fun. Aside from being a gifted musician, James enjoyed dancing and had an innate love of people. James was working on a business degree and hoped to go into the business side of entertainment. He leaves behind many friends and a family that loved him dearly." Tim, Jacob's father, also released a statement saying, "Kathy has been my beloved wife. of 32 years and a wonderful mother to our 4 sons. She loved nothing more than being a mother and grandmother. She had a strong love of learning and was passionate about her Christian faith, natural health, and organic farming, though no official motive was ever released, as Jacob never opened up about why he did what he did. Lori Tonkovic, Jacob's temporary mother during the 2008 episode of Wife Swap, suggested that the lack of freedom may have caused Jacob to snap. She claimed that due to the boys' inability to make their own decisions, Jacob felt the strict upbringing catching up to him. She said, "When I switched the rules and I was going to let them have fun, let them have a television and video games, and experience life a little bit, Jacob ran outside crying. And when I went out after him, I asked him what was wrong, and he said that his mom and dad would tell him that he would burn in hell. God gives you free will. Free will they didn't have. They weren't allowed to make choices. I think it just caught up to him."
What was your reaction?
I actually, when my son called me to tell me what had happened, he didn't know who the shooter was. I knew immediately.
You knew in your heart that it was Jacob.
Yeah.
Stark County Sheriff George T. Mayer said, "It's hard to, kind of surmise what the motive may have been. There is some speculation. We don't really want to get into that part of it, but we will continue to investigate this case and try to determine if there is a motive. We just do not know at this time. Whatever your thoughts are on this case, one thing is certain, there are no winners here. Charles and Calvin lost their brother and mother, and Tim lost his wife and son, and they all in some way lost Jacob, who will now spend most of his life behind bars. It's clear that Kathy's approach, while stringent, came from a place of deep love and care for her family, but perhaps she pushed it too far, and it was all too much for Jacob. I hope that Jacob is receiving the help he needs, and that wherever the rest of the Stockdale family is today, they are doing okay. And as always, rest in peace, Kathy and James Stockdale."